Welcome to Exercise Leadership 2. We're doing the second part of Chapter 5, which goes more into the ACE Integrated Fitness Training. So this is going to be another what not to do session, but I think it's important. And a lot of times it's important to understand that not everything written in textbooks is true. And so this is going to be a good lesson on that. So let's get to it. All right. So again, some of the stuff they have in here is right, and some of the stuff they don't. And so let me premise this. So a lot of the textbooks that we use when it comes to exercise science are based on the fact that they're made by a company that does certifications, and they want you to buy their textbooks and they want you to do their certifications. So in the past, most of the textbooks used to be very similar. They just gave out the scientific facts and theories, like the laws and theories, along with, like different training protocol theories and methods. And you basically then would take that knowledge and apply it how you see fit. Well, a lot of these companies realized that, a lot of trainers were buying they'd find a textbook that they liked, they'd buy that one, and then they would test out for multiple personal training certifications based on just buying one textbook. So like you could buy the NSCA textbook, and and again, that's probably the one that was recommended by most faculty because it's by far the hardest textbook. And again, that's by far the hardest personal training exam to pass. And so people would get that one. They'd take the NASM or they'd take the ACE and be able to pass them very easily. And so when these companies figured this out, they started having to put new things in their books. One of the things that ACE did is they created their own training protocol, which is what we see here in Chapter 5. Or the introduction of it in Chapter 5. NASM has done the same thing. The thing that they've also done is they've created new vernacular for terms that we have common vernacular in the fitness industry. So that if you're taking their test, you have to know, the words that they use and the terms that they use versus what's common. And again, on the test, they'll have the common term and they'll have the NASM term. And so if you don't know it, you're going to go with, well, oh, yeah, this is what everybody says in the gym, or this is what I've learned in textbooks. So they've done that. And it's a power play for you to buy their textbooks and take their certifications. So in doing so, ACE had to create this whole training process that they have. And really, it's a marketing ploy. There's no scientific reason for what they have. Or, I mean, I take it back. There's little reason for how it, it could work. But really, when you look at the evidence-based approach and you take in, why people come to you, what they spend, why they're spending time with you and why they're wanting your help, and you use this approach, more times than not, you're going to lose the clients before you actually help them make any headway. Again, Equinox uses this type of teaching. So they have their own certification if you go become a Equinox trainer. They use very similar training pattern. Again, it doesn't work well with getting new clients and keeping them going and so on and so forth. So again, I thought about skipping this chapter, but I thought, what, this is a good teaching experience for you guys. So we're going to do it. All right. So again, you want to create a positive exercise experience first, which is true. Okay. In helping clients modify behavior to establish the habit of regular activity. So we start with some truth. Okay. After 2 to 4 weeks of regular activity, clients will experience more stable, positive moods due to changes in hormone levels, neurotransmitter levels, endorphin, serotonin, norepinephrine, increase in self-efficacy with task and short-term goal achievement, improved performance due to positive neuromuscular adaptations to exercise. These things are all still true as we're going through this. Again, personal trainers should make exercise fun and emphasize regular adherence to programs. So again, there's a number of things that go on. You've got chemical things that go on. You've got psychological things that go on. And again, if they're having fun or they see that they're getting better at things, that also builds back into the self-efficacy, so on and so forth. Again, these are all things that we hope happen. For some folks, the hormone changes don't happen as fast as other folks. For other people, the getting better at the tasks may take long. So again, there's some give and take in how that works. Some people, they will see more hormone neuromuscular changes versus actual like physiological muscular changes. So with that said, sometimes people may get discouraged because they're getting stronger, so to speak. They see the weights going up, they're getting better at their movement patterns and so on and so forth, but their body's not changing. Some other folks don't necessarily have as long of a wait period because they're, maybe they haven't been lifting a while, but they're still somewhat active and they do things. So again, they may see more of the muscle phys changes. And again, so they're seeing the body change a bit more. With the increased weights, they associate body change with that, and that helps out too. And again, that's it's going to be individualized based on the folks. Like they're based on their body, based on their experience, based on the last time they've done anything active, so on and so forth. Okay. And so again, this stuff is, not, it doesn't always work exactly that way, but yeah. So again, strategies for developing and enhancing rapport. It's not really strategies, it's, we talk about it like, it's like, okay, you got to do these tricks or not. It's nothing like that. You want to enhance rapport, have a good attitude, look professional, and just be generally interested in what they have to say, right? And ask them questions so you can get to know them and get to know what they want. Okay. So like I said, it's like being on a date. You want good rapport, man, talk to your date, ask them questions, be generally interested. Right. Again, you don't necessarily need to identify their readiness to change. You just got to get used to talking to people where they're at and kind of taking cues of what they say, answering the questions that they have, honestly and appropriate to what they're wanting to know. Again, the stage of change, if you're so worried about like, are they pre-contemplation, contemplation, things like that, you'll lose the conversation, right? It's fine if you want to identify that at some point, in your head, either during the conversation or after, but not something you want to dwell on. Okay. Foster exercise adherence by creating positive exercise experiences. That's huge, right? When people have positive experiences, they tend to want to do those things again. Okay. And that's usually why we have folks that quit working out, because they had negative experiences, whether they weren't seeing results or they just had bad trainers or a combination of both that, just wasn't working for them. Appropriately selecting and timing assessments and reassessments. Assessments can be things that you schedule out. They can be things that naturally happen during the workout. And same with the reassessments. You got to read the clients. Some clients want to know their body fat. They are fine with doing like some of the more invasive measurements. And what I mean by invasive would be, like if you do like the skin calipers or something like that, I mean, you've got to show some skin in areas that you may not feel comfortable with yourself. Or if you do like the bod pod and you got to get in, the egg in a swimsuit and things like that. Some people may not feel that, right? And again, depending on what methods you have at your gym, may make that more appropriate or non-appropriate based on the person, right? Designing programs, supervising workouts, implementing progressions that match each client's current health and fitness status, needs, and goals. That's true. Foster a sense of self-reliance to enable the clients to take ownership of their lifestyle change. That's huge, right? And this is where a lot of trainers fail, is that because they want to try to keep the clients forever, and that's not a good way to do things. Eventually they're going to break off, and the problem is when they do break off, then they fail afterwards, right? And then they're going to badmouth because they're going to, they didn't get where they wanted to get. Where if you will just, understand at some point the baby bird's going to leave the nest, and you prepare them to leave the nest, when somebody sees them and they're like, wow, you look amazing, everything, what happened? Well, I was training with so and so and they helped me out so much, right? They bring you new clients as they leave. Okay. um, and so again, you're helping them transition from maintenance to from the action to maintenance. Really, again, don't even think in those terms. There's just that point at which they got this, right? They got this. They don't need you, and you just let them know, like, hey, if you ever need help, come back. But you've got this, and you're ready to go, right? Baby bird leaving the nest. Help them to implement relapse prevention strategies, right? So again, you're kind of helping them become an adult, like I said. Transition from extrinsic to intrinsic. Again, there might always be extrinsic motivations around, but they do need to have that desire from within just to keep going, keep going, keep going. And it's not bad if there's some extrinsic, like every once in a while somebody notices, like, hey, you look amazing, or wow, I didn't realize you're so strong, or whatever it is. Those things are still good to have every now and again, right? Sometimes they kind of help somebody know, like, hey, I'm still doing this, right? Again, establish realistic short-term and long-term goals to prevent burnout. So one of the biggest problems we run into a lot of times is people come in with unrealistic goals, or trainers sell them on unrealistic goals because they think that's the only way they're going to get the sale. And it just, again, you've got to fix that day one, right? You have to fix realistic goals day one. If you let them go with false, basically it's like you lied to them, and they'll figure that out, right? Factor clients' external stresses into total fatigue to avoid training plateaus, prevent overtraining. Again, most folks, you don't really need to worry about overtraining. It's very rare you're going to have that. Most of the time, it's like where you got like the real intense clients, or you have elite athletes and things like that. But again, like sometimes if somebody's just having, like, they've been having a rough time at work, I'm not really worried about overtraining at that point, but sometimes it's more of a mental thing. Like they may just need a break. You're like, hey, take a 3-day weekend. I'll see you on Monday. Something like that. Like, it's Fridays, and they're just like, man, I've had this week. And again, you got to read it, because sometimes the training is a good, like, stress reliever for them too. So again, once you get to know your client, well, when to, like, be like, you know what, I think it's a good idea you come on in. We'll do, and again, you can do a workout that's based more on helping them with the stress relief, or, maybe they do need a break. You're like, you know what, tomorrow, why don't you go get out of town, go fishing, go do something, like something like that, and help them, and be like, you know what, no worries on that. We won't charge for Friday. We'll just add that towards the end of your package or something like that. And again, by doing those things and showing that you're not all about the money, and you're helping them out, it builds more rapport and trust. Okay. Again, empower the clients by helping them gain self-efficacy and knowledge to train. Again, the more they know, the higher their self-efficacy goes. The more success they see, the higher their self-efficacy goes. I mean, these are your main goals as a trainer. And then, yeah, you want to help them make it a long-term habit. You want this to be a lifelong decision, right? So here's where we get into the garbage, right? These phases, and nothing within the phases is wrong. It's just the fact that you would train in phases, right? That you're going to do nothing but stability and mobility for a while and some aerobic based training until they move to phase 2, right? There's no reason to do that, because again, if phase 1 is not necessarily is moving them towards a goal that you set for them based on the fact that you feel like something wrong's going, like they're just like they have too much mobility issues or things like that, but it's not necessarily helping them towards where they want to go, because the thing is you don't know how long they're going to be in phase 1. So, if they're progressing slowly in phase one, and yet, by doing that, they're not really gaining the muscle strength that they came in with their goals, or they're not gaining the weight loss or whatever it is, because they're staying in phase one, or they stay too long in phase one and phase two, they're going to, again, burn out because of lack of reaching their goals. They may be reaching your goals, or they're moving towards your goals because you did an assessment on them and you feel like these goals are important. Again, nobody, you're not really going to get a lot of folks to come in there just like, unless they had some type of incident where they got hurt because of stability or mobility. Most people aren't coming in for that. 90% of your folks coming in are like weight loss, or they want to look better, so that could be a combination of weight loss, or at least fat loss and muscle mass gain or something. That's what most PT clients want, right? So if we're not working on that in phase one, or we're not, or it doesn't seem purposeful towards that too. Again, if a client's like, yeah, I'm trying to muscle up and lose body fat, and you're doing all this like movement stuff, and you're not really doing like any bench and squat, like things that they know, they're like, no, this is where yeah, I should be working on or learning to work on, there's going to be a problem. And that's why this doesn't work. And again, NASM, after ACE decided to do this, NASM has their own idiot training model too. Again, every client is different, and you may have a client that this is what they want. And so you could do something like this. Again, I wouldn't follow this, because again, now you're using a cookie cutter approach. But every client that comes in is unique, and you've got to treat them that way, and you've got to help them work towards their goals. Now, again, while you're helping them get stronger, while you're helping them lose body fat, you can work on stability and mobility. You can add movements to each exercise, or you can add extra exercises in that work on these things, right? We can do all kinds of movement training. So looking at phase two, we can do a movement, we could do stability, mobility training, and do some aerobic stuff. We could do movement training and aerobic efficiency training, base training, and efficiency training simultaneous, right? We can do phase one, phase two together. We can also do phase three within the same weeks, right? Do some load training, some anaerobic endurance training, right? They can do push-ups, for anaerobic endurance training. They can do some HIIT stuff, plus do some aerobic based stuff, like some short bursts of HIIT or whatever, or, they can do loaded weights from day one, okay? While working on stability, mobility, and movement. And again, performance, right? If somebody's got some, you can do stuff if they're able to do, like, again, they may not be able to do like, like SSC type, plyometric stuff, maybe some stuff they can, maybe some stuff they can't, again, you'll kind of see what they can and cannot do, and what's appropriate, and what's going to, add to injury or not. And add that stuff into, so if you have somebody that's training for performance and all that, or they need to do some anaerobic power stuff, again, we can do some anaerobic power stuff, whether it's just, like doing some power, some vertical jumps or something like that, if it's appropriate for the person. It doesn't have to be weighted anaerobic power, if that is good for them and that's where they're going, we can do any one of these throughout the entire thing. And again, we can go from simplistic stuff to more complicated stuff as we go, because they're learning new movements and so on and so forth. But again, holding somebody in a phase because they haven't graduated is not a good way to do things, right? So again, this goes back into all this stuff again, right? Just forget this. This is nonsense, okay? So let me talk about what these different things are. Again, don't look at the phase one and two, but just so you understand what they're talking about in this, right? So muscle balance. Muscle balance is, again, one of those things that we talk about, but what is it? Right? What is muscle balance? If anybody can give me a direct muscle balance answer, I'd be very impressed, because again, Yeah. Have I seen some folks that have huge calves and underdeveloped hamstrings? Sure. Have I seen folks that do nothing but biceps and they neglect their triceps? Sure. But how do you determine what's balanced? Because again, um, mechanically, my tricep has a mechanical advantage over the way that it's built from a lever standpoint versus my bicep. So if I train bis and tris all the time, and I really push myself in both of them, I'm going to naturally start to be stronger in triceps just because the lever that it is, right? Versus the lever that I have in my bicep. So that's from a biomechanics kinesiology standpoint. Okay. So again, if you neglect thinking about that and you think that, okay, well, if I can bicep curl 50 pounds, I should be able to tricep extend 50 pounds. More than likely, you can tricep extend more than 50 if you're working as hard on both sides of it, right? Same thing with quads. Quads not only have the mechanical advantage of the type of lever it is, but you also have your kneecap or your patella, which can act as a pulley system. It adds a whole different mechanical advantage to the way that it goes in there. So you are naturally stronger on leg extension than leg curl because of the mechanical advantage of the patella, and also the way that lever system set up versus the other lever system. Okay. So you naturally are probably not going to lift as much on a leg curl versus a leg extension unless you're working more on the leg curls versus the leg extension. So what is muscle balance? And again, depending on the athlete, most athletes are not muscle balanced. A right-handed pitcher is going to have certain muscles because of the motions that they do every single day, throwing the ball from the mound right-handed, right-handed, right-handed. They, even with balancing their exercise in the gym, they're going to be right-sided dominant with throwing. They're going to be, maybe left foot dominant with, how their left leg extends to plant, and then they push off the right. There's going to be some dominance there. Okay. And again, it's okay because of what they do. We see that with boxers. Boxers are push versus pull dominant because they're always punching forward. They do things forward. Doesn't mean that we just don't even let them like lift back and do those things, but you're never going to overcompensate for the fact that they push, 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 push by the nature of their sport. Okay. So again, muscle balance is a weird, tricky thing because again, you've got to understand each person's different. The needs of their environment and what they do is different. And again, there's certain mechanical advantages and disadvantages in different systems, lever systems that we have in the body that are going to create where it's not like you lift the same on both, but that doesn't mean that you're out of balance either. Okay. So again, muscle balance is a hard, tricky rabbit hole to get into. Muscle endurance. Now, muscle endurance, again, it's basically how many of something can you do before you fail, right? So, it could be like push-ups or how many air squats you can do. That's muscle endurance, right? And so, again, you can do that with no or light weight. You can do it for, like, okay, we'll do as many as we can in 5 minutes, whatever it is. Um, you can plank for a certain amount of time. Again, that's an isometric muscle endurance. So a lot of different things we can do there. And again, this is something you can do like, when they first start working out, and it's stuff you can still use and be beneficial when they've been working out for several years, right? So it's not something that we just like, okay, once you get past a point, you're done, right? Core function. Now, again, core function, in the sense that they're going to talk about it in here, is probably, working on your core muscles. So when we talk about that, we're talking like abs, oblique, low back. It's your stability muscles that hold you upright from your trunk section, right? Core exercises are going to be the building block exercises. These are multi joint exercises, things like a squat, bench, deadlift. Those are all what we call core exercises, right? So different things. Flexibility. Again, we can work on flexibility from a lot of different ways. You could do static hold flexibility. You can do PNF stretching. Um, you know, we can do, like a combination of different flexibility things. We can add flexibility movements like going through full range of motion during exercises. Again, you can increase some flexibility during dynamic warm-ups. Now, again, most flexibility is going to be gained by doing like the static holds and the PNF stretching and all that. And again, we want to do that towards the end of a workout once the body's warmed up, right? Versus, cold muscles and things that haven't been warmed up yet, right? Static and dynamic balance. So, how are you balanced when you're just standing still versus like balanced during movements, would be your dynamic. Again, assessing posture, right? So there's some folks that'll have somebody stand and sit and do those, and they look at posture. Again, you should be able to notice how somebody's posture is when they come walking into your office, when they sit in a chair, when they stand up. And so again, you can, help them with that. And again, it's one of those things that you're probably gonna, this is one of those things, if this is a graduation point, most people aren't gonna improve their posture and be able to like remember how to hold their posture good all the time within like the first few weeks. And then you can be like, okay, we're gonna go from phase 1 to phase 2 or within the first month, right? Now, again, you'll have some people that you're always going to be, like kind of getting onto them. So if they slouch and do things when they walk, you may be doing that for months, maybe, the whole time you have them, like quit slouching, right? And like your grandma does, flicks you in the back of the ear, right? Quit slouching. Okay. So again, we want to work on posture. And again, it's really important during their movements, right? So we really want them to have good posture. So again, there's, a lot of times you'll find people that have poor normal posture in their daily living, typically after working with a good trainer, will have impeccable posture during exercise movements, because you're training them on something new. And so every time they lay down to do a bench or they sit to do like a back row or something like that, because you've coached them through those movements, all of a sudden this person that's got poor posture has good posture during that, right? So you'll find that does happen a lot. Balance, right? You incorporate balance movements into, complex things, easy things. Again, there's always points at which you can incorporate that throughout the entirety of their training that they're with you, right? Movement, every movement that you have would be under movement, for assessing, right? So, and again, if you want to judge their movement or judge their balance, there's things that you can test. Some are better than others. Again, a lot of times it's good to maybe test based on what they do versus, just arbitrary tests. Sometimes sometimes the arbitrary tests that we use for everything are just good overall assessments. We use that. Range of motion. Best way to do range of motion is goniometer measurement. So again, physical therapists will do this. Now again, they usually only do it on the areas that are affected, like why they're in to see the PT. But again, you as a practitioner could do range of motion on everything if you want. Okay. Or you can do the overall, like the sit and reach and things like that, and put that in there too. But again, if you really want an accurate measurement, you're gonna have to goniometer like every joint in every movement plane that it does. So you think like shoulders and hips and ankles and stuff, you're gonna have a lot of different goniometer tests, right? So again, this is stuff that, if you're doing, I'm not even getting into it. This drives me nuts. So, things that do promote stability. So these do promote, like you can do stability promoting things. So you can do, you know, like everything in this, but I wouldn't just do this stuff, like just go like one after, you know, like, I mean, again, do work on their flexibility, work on isometric contractions in certain settings, also do dynamic movements, you know, work in the same muscles and joint areas. Again, um, limited range of motion strengthening, just kind of depends, like if they have any injuries or problems, you know, you may do that. Again, try to work them through full range of motion anytime you do anything. Static balance is always important. Again, most exercises you do are going to take some static balance before they get moving. You know, you think about, you know, if you do standing bicep curl, right? So there's static balance while you're doing some upper body dynamics, right? You know, again, you've got to use muscles to stay statically still, because when your arms move, your body wants to sway back and forth, right? You know, you can do wall sits and things like that. Core activation, right? Just again, how do we do that? Well, you can do things like, you know, it's showing the lady on the floor. She can do some stomach hollowing or some things. He may have her doing some different things where she's activating the low back. And, you know, like you can raise your butt up and bridge and activate some things. You know, we can do stuff that's more core intensive or purposeful. Again, you know, if you have them doing squats and things like that, they're going to naturally learn to activate the core, because they have good range of motion and have good posture while they do it. They're going to have to learn how to, right? So again, incorporating some of those more complex things early on are great for teaching them to do core activation, you know, where they can hold a small weight in front that kind of, you know, like now creates like a goblet type squat, or a you know, like a front squat or something like that with a little weight. They still have to activate versus putting weight on the back and things like that. Spinal stabilization, again, you can do exercises for it, or you can just demand it while they do other exercises, right? And muscular endurance, again, these are things that we don't just do at the beginning. You're going to do it throughout, right? So why limit to just that, right? So theoretically they want you to go from that, and then eventually you can move them into these things, right? So bend and lift movements like squatting and stuff. Again, you can start squatting from day one. And again, if it's something that they're interested in, you should be getting them to squat from day one. And again, squatting helps with flexibility. You know, especially if you're helping them work down into positions that they haven't done in a while. Helps with some isometric contractions, especially in the core. Again, they can get some limited range of motion strengthening. So if they have injuries, they don't need to go all the way through. You're going to help them work on things, you know, where they feel comfortable. Again, static balance. You know, you have to have a good starting posture where they go from. Again, you may hand them a small weight or whatever to hold on to, and they've got to balance before they get moving. And then they'll do some dynamic balancing throughout the movement, which we haven't talked about yet. The core activation is huge on squats. Spinal stabilization is going to be huge on squats. And again, if they're doing lots of reps, low weight or no weight, they're going to get muscle endurance. Shocking. Single leg movements. Again, you can do lunging and things like this from day one. You know, depending on how they feel with their movement patterns and things like that, just be careful with it. You know, some people may have, you know, like one leg that they're okay on, another leg that they're like off balance on. And so again, you may want to do you know, like maybe some quarter lunges with both feet on the ground and then switch and things like that. And so it just depends on the different person, right? Pushing and pulling movements, again, should start from day one. And rotational movements, right? And again, you know, rotational movements are great as long as that you have them stabilizing the spine and doing those and not trying to yank something out of the wall. Again, proper sequence, you know, you're always doing proper sequence of movements in everything you do, right? So again, we're always telling them like, okay, I want to see you do this first, then this, then this, then this, right? Center of gravity, you know, you want to control your center of gravity. Again, sometimes if you have somebody, you can help them focus on keeping their center of gravity, especially we keep our center of gravity low. especially when you get to the athletic movements. We always want a low center of gravity, but we want them to somewhat be aware of where their center of gravity is, because again, that has to do with, again, if we go back to squats, if their center of gravity is too far forward, their knees are going too far forward, they're on their toes, can cause some problems. If it's too far back, they may fall backwards. It may be to the left, to the right. Again, we may not use center of gravity terms, but we may want them to have those internal cues of where they're at. Promote dynamic balance and active flexibility, or again, from day one. These are things we don't need to wait till phase 2. Day 1, build muscle endurance, promote mobility. Day 1. Right? You're always promoting mobility, and again, their muscle endurance is going to get stronger, because again, especially with newbies, you don't want to put a lot of weight on them. We want to get them to get good at the movements. Therefore, they're going to do lighter weights when we work on movements. So they'll do a lot of reps to get the movements down, right? And emphasize controlled motion deceleration performed with controlled eccentric muscle actions. Again, we don't want them cranking through things unless that's the purpose, right? Unless we're doing something that's a high explosive movement. No. And again, the explosive stuff you may want to wait on. It again depends on the person and what their goals are. Some folks you're going to be doing some explosive movement stuff from day 1. Some folks you won't. All right. Again, typical daily, your daily living activities. Different people have different lives, so their daily living activities can be vastly different, but most of us have some things that are in common. So, again, think of what you do, think of what they do, ask them what they do, and think of things that might be beneficial exercises that may help in that, again, as long as they align with their other goals. 5 primary movements that you do. Again, some people may have some primary movements that you're like, I don't do that. And again, when you're doing things, this is why a lot of times when we think of daily living activities, we don't think of single joint movements, because we don't do a lot of single joint movement stuff in our days. Most of our stuff are multi-joint, but there are a few things that are kind of single joint, that we do, right? So phase 3 is load training. Again, you need load train from day 1, right? First day they're in there, especially if somebody's wanting to get stronger, they're going to want to get on some of the machines and do some of the weight stuff. So don't let them get disinterested by being like, like pulling like this, like you're not ready for that type of stuff. You're not Yoda, you're not Miyagi. We're not doing that. Okay. Again, so we're going to do loading, and we're going to let them progress through that. And yeah, we'll increase it as they get better at doing it. It's going to help with their neuromuscular and everything else that they're doing. Again, we use the FIT principle for everything, so again, frequency, intensity, timing, and really the other two is like duration, but it's you've got like time, we've got like how many times, like how the amount of time it takes to do some, as well as like like how many times is in frequency, like frequent. Well, we have frequency you can use in 2 different manners, right? How often they do it, the intensity, like how hard is it, the timing of it, and like how you move forward with all that as well, right? So again, muscle hypertrophy, enhanced muscle endurance, improving muscular strength are all different things we can work on. Again, the focus will be more on what their training goals. So if it's hypertrophy over strength or endurance, we're going to make most of the rep ranges focus on that. Doesn't mean that we won't do some of those other things, because again, after some heavy training days, like if you do muscle strength heavy training days, so say strength is their thing, well, they may not be able to do like real good strength stuff by the next time those muscles come around. So we may do more hypertrophy endurance on the day 2 of the same muscles, And again, it'll still enhance some of the strength. It's just that's not the focus for those days. And then again, that may add into a little bit of rest. So by the third, by the next time they come back, we can do like really focus on strength again. Okay. So different things that you can have them do. Selectorized equipment. Selectorized is the stack plates. A lot of times people call those ones plate loaded is this where you actually get like the 45-pound plates and you can put them on there, or the 10-pound plates. It's got like, it's those are the ones that look like a combination between a machine and a free weight, right? And so you can add the free weights onto the machines. That's plate loaded, right? Selectorized is the little training plates and you put the pins in. Okay. So again, both are usually called like plate load. Like in the gym, people call both of them like, oh yeah, go to the one and put it on the 10-pound plate, and they may be talking about selectorized. Okay. So just get used to that. Barbells, dumbbells, kettlebells are all great tools and you should use them all. I hate when people are like, oh yeah, this one's better than that. No, use them all. They all have good purpose, right? Medicine balls are great, especially if you get the good squishy ones that, like, if somebody misses it and it hits them in the face, it's not gonna, like, it's not the hard rubber ones that's gonna break their nose. Those are, I love those ones. Elastic tubing, again, can be a great tool. Good and bad about elastic is with the elastic is it when you first start the stretch, there's not a lot of resistance in it. As it gets stretched out, it becomes harder. So that is both a good and bad thing, because it's not a consistent pressure throughout the engagement of the elastic, right? So that could be a bad thing if you want them to feel what it's like to have a constant load. Now, if you want them to realize as they get to the end of a range of motion or something like that, and you want it to get tougher and tougher as they go, you can do elastic tubing. You can do stuff where you add chains to the weight. So as the weight goes further away from the ground, it gets heavier. And I mean, there's purpose in each thing, right? And so understand that. And again, sometimes elastic tubing is good to send them home with because they can do it anywhere too. So again, it may not be like exactly ideal for like having a constant, um, you know, uh, a constant weight throughout the motion, but it's still a good useful tool, right? Even though that, maybe you're wanting constant weight, but again, you're just like, well, this is fine. Okay. So just understand, sometimes we use things, out of convenience. Sometimes we use those same things because we want that resistance to change throughout the motion. Okay. Um, Again, you can do non-traditional strength training equipment. So things like tire flipping and stuff like that is, they call it, it's funny, some people call it non-traditional, but some folks are like, nah, I've been doing that forever, right? So, because again, in athletics, we've done what I guess you would call non-traditional for so many athletes, because again, the applications of them are good for their sports. And now we do a lot of that stuff with non-athletes, right? Um, Again, focus is always on good form, increasing the ability of the muscles to generate force, and again, safety throughout everything they do. You can do linear undulating periodization models. We'll talk about that later. Focus on single joint movements, transition to full body. Again, when you get new people involved, sometimes the single joint, it's good to maybe make sure they understand, like, like how do you do a proper bicep curl before you start getting them to do like, full on, you know, um, or like a tricep extension, like like, okay, let's make sure tricep extension they understand maybe prior to them doing like a chest press. Um, you know, maybe not, especially if you're going to if you work on the simplistic machines that limit error. It's not going to matter if you start them on those, which, so you could start on chest press or leg press or anything like that if you want to begin with on those, if you're going to stay in that realm for a while before you start getting them on the cable type machines or free weights and things like that, right? And again, just depends on the person how safe you think it is. Okay. Um, you can do split routine, circuit training style. You can do all the muscle groups in one day. You can do, chest one day, back the next day. You could do a couple muscle groups, and it really depends on the person, the amount of time they got, how many days a week they want to train, and what their goals are, right? Performance training. So again, this is one of those ones, not everybody's going to do this, right? So, I mean, this is why it's like, they have this as it's phase 4, but man, my 95-year-old grandma's not going to work on speed, agility, quickness, and reactivity and power. So say she was working out and somebody's working with her. Not one, she's not interested in this, and two, it's probably not really appropriate for her. Power training is not really going to be that appropriate for her at her age and where she's at. So again, you've got to figure out who this is needed for, and some clients won't really need to do power training. Every once in a while you may use it, like for maybe some high intensity interval stuff, you may use some of the speed, agility, reactivity stuff for some high intensity interval stuff, just, to help burn some calories and give them some new things to do, or to get their heart rate up, or whatever you're doing. Yeah, some folks will do it, some folks won't. Some folks it's appropriate for, some folks it's not. Okay. So we're not going to necessarily graduate to this for everybody. Like if this was a stage, it's like not everybody goes to stage 4, they don't need to, they have no goals in stage 4. So again, adding some of these things in to the earlier, like from day 1 again too, is okay, as long as it's appropriate for them and it's safe for them, right? So again, you just got to understand, you can do all this from day 1, and you can do all this on day 2001, right? Good things to understand: power is force, force times velocity. So again, a lot of people are like, okay, well, what does that mean? I like the second one better because this gives you a better, I think it's better, it's an easier understanding. So like when you think of powerlifting is funny because it's actually misappropriately termed, because powerlifting is squats, deadlift, and bench. These are not quick lifts. They're very purposeful. You got to take your time on the lift to do it. You're not going to you're not going to use your stretch shortening cycle. You're not going to bounce into anything while you're doing those. Okay. These are very purposeful. These are straight up muscle strength lifting. Okay. Power, on the other hand, now again, you think Olympic lifting, but again, when you're doing an all out Olympic lift, it's again more strength versus power, just because you can't do it super, super fast because you're doing like max weight, right? Now, if you take it down to a sub max weight, we can find that sweet spot where you're really hitting your power peak. Okay. So, like if you're lifting 150 pounds during a power clean, and you can do it in like 0.2 seconds or something like that, you're going to see like a power rating that's really high. So you look at the work, that's how much weight you're lifting. So you're lifting that, you know, over a certain distance. So you're going to lift the weight, right? So, so if we look at force, it's the mass and the acceleration, right? So we get the force, we do that by the distance that weight moves, right? And you get that, and then you do that times velocity, you can get it, which is distance divided by time, or we just get the force times distance, right? So that's the mass times acceleration, times the distance, and we do that divided by the time, right? So like you can see how these kind of get crossed around, and you can use, because you kind of have to use all of them, right? So if you think of work, so let's just simplify work. We won't even worry about the distance. We're not going to necessarily worry about the force. So let's just say, like, if you really wanted to simplify and look at it this way. So if I'm lifting 150 pounds, say we simplify work to just the mass of the object, right? So, and again, force is basically whatever overcomes that mass. So if you can lift 150 pounds, you got to at least be able to have a force of more than 150 to lift that weight, right? So we have 150 pounds, you can move it in half a second to a power clean, right? if you do 150 divided by 0.5, that's going to give you, again, this isn't true work. This is kind of like a like a little fake equation. That's going to give you a theoretical power of 300, right? So let's say that you go up to 160 pounds. So you only go up 10 pounds, but let's say that now takes you a full second. So you divide that by 1. Well, now you got a power rating of 160 versus before at half a second, you could do that. You had a power rating of 300, right? Now, again, we can go through and do the full work, like figure out the mass times acceleration, the force, the work, and then divide by time. And you're going to see the same principle play out, right? So as you go up to too high of a number and it slows you down too much, you see your power goes down. Now, again, your strength is a whole different thing, right? But power is going to be the big factor in the power is the time. How fast can you do it, right? So when you think of a power, like when we think of powerlifting is not power. So when we're training athletes, we don't train them at their max lift for cleans and snatches and things like that. We're looking at like how much explosion movement can they do, right? So it's like explosion. Think about it. You're moving a lot of things in a quick amount of time. So again, there's that thing of like if the weight's too light and you do it really, really fast, the power rating is not that high. So you move the weight up. And then there's that point at which the weight gets to a point, your speed is good. That's where your max power is at that time. And then if you keep moving your weight up too much and then the speed goes down too much, you see that power number come down. So the power number can start low because you don't have enough work that you're doing, but the time's fast. Or your power number can be low because you got way too much weight and you're doing too much work and now the timing's too slow, right? So that's how power works. So again, these phases, straight garbage. Don't pay attention to this. Again, that's why I really suggest you guys don't go get the ACE certification. I really feel in most didactic circles, in science circles, it's really lost its appeal. Okay. So again, when we talk about aerobic, cardiorespiratory, health, endurance, energy, mood, calorie expenditure, these are all going to be important, and they're going to be important even if if they're doing this stuff at the beginning, more than likely they're going to do this stuff like when they're leaving you too, right? We're going to do this just in phase 1, right? So again, if you want to build cardiorespiratory fitness, you can do that throughout. Like you can do that from day 1 and you do that from day 2001, right? Again, they say, during this, you want to do steady state intensities. Again, some people like steady state, some people don't, right? So if you have somebody that just like, they don't want to run for 10 minutes straight or bike for 10 minutes straight, or 30 minutes straight or whatever it is, don't do that to them, right? You have them do some like kind of HIIT training stuff. Now, again, if they're, there's a danger to that, figure out movements that are safe for them to do, and things that they can do, like go from this to this to this to this. It's okay, right? They can do HIIT type or circuit type or whatever. Okay. Right. They don't have to do this. They don't have to do it for 20 to 30 minutes. Okay. It really depends on where they're at. And again, they can do 20, 30 minutes of HIIT. They can do 20, 30 minutes of cross training, or of, like, like CrossFit stuff too. If it's appropriate for, like the way that they put it out, or a boot camp or whatever else, right? Just, it's okay to do those things as long as they're not overdoing it and they're not doing it in an unsafe manner. Okay. Again, if they want you to start doing interval stuff in phase 2. Well, again, some people are going to do interval and that's all they're ever going to do for aerobic because they hate doing steady state. Some people are going to want to mix it up. Some days they'll want to do steady state. Some days they're going to do interval. You know, it's okay, right? You don't have to like, you don't have to have like one method, because again, if they're not training to be a distance runner, they don't need to do steady state running. If they are training to be a distance runner, but they want to have some days where they just take off from that, but they want to work on their cardio, then they're going to do some HIIT, right? I mean, that's the thing, you know, everybody's going to be different. You're going to have to train them different, right? So this is on your ventilatory threshold 1, 2. You'll also see these hit about the same as with the lactic thresholds, you know, and this just has to do with inflections of when you need more. Basically, you're needing more at these points, right? So you're at this nice incline, everything's going, then all of a sudden, like, you hit a wall, right? So your ventilation increases, your oxygen exchange needs to change at this point, right? We also see in this same point, we'll see blood lactate increase at near or around these two areas. Again, we call it lactate threshold. And again, people have misconceptions of what that means. So we measure blood lactate, but what we notice with the spike in blood lactate is also a spike in the hydrogen ions that are left in the wake of the muscles, with the inability to exchange oxygen and all the, you know, get the oxygen into the muscles and get carbon dioxide and all the hydrogen ions and everything out and buffer those out of the system. As that happens and you have a buildup of hydrogen ions, the muscles and the lack of getting oxygen and things in and being able to get the energy in and get the byproducts out, your muscles start to fatigue and you're not able to push as hard as you were just a second ago or a few seconds ago or a minute ago, right? So again, we can see these inflections, you know, when we're measuring oxygen exchange. We can see the ventilatory threshold. We can also measure it in the blood in the lactate. So again, we measure lactate, but it doesn't mean that lactate's a bad thing. People get that like, oh, your lactate goes up, that's somehow bad. No, it's just when we see a spike in lactate, we also know there was a spike in hydrogen ion production, right? And then we see that at the second one too. And it is when you see both of those things happen, you're going to see the person struggling at VT1, and you see them really start struggling at VT2. Okay. And so again, the more you train cardiorespiratory, you're going to see those things move out. You're going to see the lactate thresholds move further on because they're going to get more efficient. Okay. So again, it just really depends on what they want anaerobic wise or aerobic wise with their endurance training. All right. So again, improving performance for higher levels of cardiorespiratory fitness, again, depends on what they want. Right. You know, so again, you're going to do these things based on their training goal regimen, not based on like, okay, we're just going to go through this and we're going to do some stuff below VT1, between VT1, V2, and no, depends on who they are, what they're training for, what their goals are. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's really like they try to tell you, okay, now you got to do this at this point. No, that's what drives me nuts, right? So again, I'm not going to worry about this because this all depends on the person that you're training, whether they're an athlete, non-athlete, you know that. Anaerobic power, right? Some people are going to want to do this, some people are not. And some people are going to have this work towards their goal, some people are not. Therefore, just depends, right? And again, it's, you know, it's the same type of thing when you're looking at the ventilatory thresholds, right? With how you do this. And again, you can do any of these, like it says, 3 to 7 days a week. Again, depends on goals, right? So then we work into special populations. Side note, that little elliptical trainer thing they have right there is really cool. We had it at my last gym. Not only can you do the elliptical front to back, this one adjusts for your stride length. So if you have somebody like this um, this older, is that a lady or gentleman? I can't, it's kind of hard to tell in the picture, but anyways, this older individual, looks like they may have shorter legs, or they may have not have good flexibility. They may have a short stride length. So this thing will actually let you do your full stride length, whether you have a short or long. Other cool thing with this one is you can just pump straight up and down like a stair stepper. All right. So you can go through several different type of movements on it, all in the same thing. And it easily adjusts from going forward to backward, stair step to elliptical. It's really cool. And again, the way you adjust it is just by what you do with your feet. You don't have to do like pin anything, or they're really neat. By the way, if you ever get a chance to get one of those for a fitness center, I kind of like these ones better than just the traditional ellipticals and stuff, just because they're multi-use. You could, like, if you had like say 6 of these, you could have 3 people doing elliptical, 3 people are doing stair stepper, or somebody could go from elliptical stairs. I mean, like every like 2 minutes they could change like what they're doing, right? It's kind of neat. So again, when you work with special pop clients, this is everything from really young people, really old people, or people that have injuries, people that have mental disabilities, people that have physical disabilities, people that have chronic illness, and so on and so forth, all fall under what we call special populations, right? And again, with all of them, same thing. We want them to adhere to workouts. We want them to have positive experiences. We want this to become a lifestyle for them. Again, the ACE IFT model does not bode well for those populations, as in the non-special pops, right? So again, just to throw that out with all the rest of the garbage that you'll ever get, okay? Adjust exercise selection, intensity, sets, reps, and duration based on where they are, what they need, where they're going. So, I mean, working with special pops isn't any different than working with what you call non-special pops. You work around any barriers you got. You work to help them overcome the things that they're able to overcome. You have a positive attitude. You constantly talk to them. You constantly, like build rapport with them. Nothing changes. The only thing that might change with some of them is that they're coming in with a doctor's note that says they can do everything but this, or these are the only things they're allowed to do because they have so many limitations. So what do? You work in the what you can do category, right? You always do what you can do category with them. Okay. That's it. They may have more limitations than your non-special pops, and that's really all it is. And you move them along at the same thing. You take them where they're at and you move them forward at a pace that's okay for them, right? Really not a lot to it. The only other thing that you might have with special pops is, like, say you have a diabetic, you may have to have them, check their blood sugars and things throughout the exercise, just so that we don't have any issues. You have somebody that's a heart patient. Guess what? If they have to check their heart and they have to check EKGs and things like that, you're not going to get them. They're going to be under doctor. Now you may, as a personal trainer, you may go get your clinical exercise phys or something and work in a hospital. That's different. Right. But yeah, you may have some things like that with some of your clients, like, like you may get diabetics or pre-diabetics and things like that, and they got to do blood sugar monitoring. You may have folks that have, like arthritis, or you may have some folks that have had joint replacements and things like that, that you got to work around some things and stuff. But I mean, that's really, not too different from some of your, like, what you term, like healthy non-special pop clients. How do you work with kids? Hey, you work with them based on, like what they mentally can grasp and understand and do. What do you do with older adults that are having declining mental Same thing you do with the kids. You have them do things that they can mentally understand and do, and physically understand, physically can do and tolerate. I mean, it's kind of how it is, right? Um, you know, it's sometimes we make it to be this huge thing, and it really isn't. You just come in with a great attitude, work around things, work with things, and just give them a positive experience and help them reach the goals that they have, right? So again, don't pay attention to the first thing. Don't pay attention to the second thing, because we don't do phases. The components, yeah, all those components you're going to do. You're going to do it from day one. You're going to do it on day 2001, like I said. And again, the central focus is creating a positive experience that helps them get where they want to go, right? And helps them to create a lifestyle change that they're going to continue to do once they leave, right? That's it. Again, I kept this stuff in because I thought, I could jump over it because it's not, you're not going to do it. And you guys are going to be more intelligent and learn more than to follow some cookie cutter and, like blueprint of go from this to this to this, because that doesn't work. But I thought, you know what, it's a good teaching of like what not to do. So today was a what not to do with a mix of stuff that you should already know that you're going to be doing, right? So that's it. I'll see you in chapter 6.